second.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe we are not in a quorum call.
That's correct.
Mr. President, I've just left a hearing involving the veterans of foreign wars before the Veterans Committee. In fact, it was a joint hearing of both the House and the Senate Veterans Committees, where I am the ranking member, and I informed them that I was coming to the floor of the United States Senate to seek unanimous consent on the Major Richard Spar Act, and there was spontaneous standing ovation. I dare say that that applause was totally bipartisan, non-political, because there is no more glaring and egregious injustice affecting veterans today, our nation's patriots, than the fact that 50,000 veterans are forced to medically retire and service members undergoing medical separation because of combat-related injuries being unable to collect both retirement benefits and disability compensation. Right now, the men and women who are in harm's way in the Middle East may be injured. We hope not, but there may be casualties. We know that some have already been injured. If they retire as a result of those combat injuries with less than 20 years of service, the majority of them have less than 20 years of service, they will be reduced in their retirement pay dollar for dollar from their VA disability benefits. Let me just repeat. Right now, combat injured veterans are getting a dollar for dollar reduction of their military retirement pay from their VA disability benefits. So if they have to retire because they've been injured in combat, they sacrifice dollar for dollar their retirement pay because of the disability benefits that they receive. They're entitled to both. They've earned both. The nation promised them both. They deserve both. The Major Richard Spar Act will finally provide some justice to those veterans. It will finally provide these military retirees with their full disability and Department of Defense retirement benefits, righting this longstanding injustice. It's sponsored by 77 of my colleagues in the Senate, including both Republicans and Democrats. It has similar support in the House of Representatives. We have never been provided with a vote. Yes, a vote. If it did receive a vote, it would pass overwhelmingly. The simple request for a vote has been denied. There are a variety of excuses that have been offered, like it costs too much. Well, as the national commander of the VFW said today in supporting this bill, the costs of providing for our veterans are part of the costs of war. We are in a war right now, in real time. And some of those combat injured veterans will be sacrificing their disability or retirement pay because of this injustice. And then some have characterized the Major Richard Spar Act as providing for double dipping. Well, our veterans forced to retire because of combat injuries have earned both. We can afford to right this injustice. Whatever the estimate on the amount of funding required, and it has varied over the years, it is a pittance compared to the costs of our national defense, close to $1 trillion now. This country can afford to do the right thing by these combat-injured veterans, and we have a moral imperative to do so. Veterans who have served more than 20 years already receive both the VA and the DoD payments in whole. Veterans who've served less than 20 years, because they are combat injured, frankly, for any reason, deserve better. This week and last, thousands of veterans have flown into our nation's capital from every corner of the country to advocate for their top priorities, and collectively, they are calling on Congress, all of them, all of the veteran service organizations, all of the groups that represent our nation's heroes, have told us unequivocally and repeatedly that correcting this injustice is absolutely necessary. The benefits they've earned are the benefits they should be receiving right now. And it will make a huge difference in the lives of all these veterans. Take, for example, Staff Sergeant Clayton Smith. He was involuntarily medically retired after 11 years in the United States Army because of his combat-related injuries. He feels that veterans impacted by this offset have upheld their commitment to serve, but the system fails to recognize its commitment to him. Promises made, promises kept, but in this case, not kept. In his words, quote, "Passing the Richard Starr Act would not only restore financial fairness, but it would restore confidence among combat-injured veterans that their sacrifice is recognized equally," end quote. It would also help veterans like Dan Nevins from Florida. His military career was ended when an improvised explosive device detonated beneath his vehicle during his deployment to Iraq in 2004. He's a bilateral amputee. He's overcome years of recurring infections and countless surgeries. He says he has no regrets about his service. He joined to serve his country. He believes it's worth fighting for. These veterans deserve elected officials who will fight for them and deliver the benefits they've earned. In the words of Barry Jesenowski, the DAV's national adjutant and CEO, quote, "Respect without action is meaningless." A message to my colleagues: respect without action is meaningless. Rhetoric without action is meaningless. Words without action are worthless. So let's put the politics aside and listen to our veterans. Let's pass the Richard Starr Act today. Mr. President, notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Armed Services be discharged and that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-1032, the Major Richard Starr Act, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Wisconsin.
Reserving the right to object. Mr. President, first of all, let's get something on the table. We all revere and respect those men and women who have served and sacrificed to defend our liberty. That's completely nonpartisan. We prove it day in and day out. We prove it by how much money we spend on veterans' benefits. So I certainly appreciate the senator from Connecticut, his advocacy. I advocate for veterans as well. It's interesting, though, This unanimous consent request is very similar to, if not identical to, the same unanimous consent request offered on October 9th of 2025 by the senator from Connecticut. At that point in time, responding to it, that unanimous consent request, the senator from Mississippi, the then and now current chair of the Armed Services Committee, stated, and I quote, "My colleague is asking for an entitlement that does amount to a double benefit and that we cannot afford. We're talking between $9 and $10 billion on the Department of Defense Authorization Act, and we're talking about a bill, a piece of legislation that really belongs in another jurisdiction." I'm assuming he's talking about the Veterans Affairs Committee. "We cannot possibly add another $9 billion to $10 billion of entitlement money to this Defense Authorization Act, and that's a reason that in Democrat majorities and Republican majorities, House Democrat majorities and Senate Democrat majorities, and in Democrat administrations, this legislation has never been accepted because we simply cannot afford it." The chairman of Armed Services went on to say, "Historically, Congress has provided permanent new benefits only after we have identified an offset, savings of a similar amount. There's no such offset identified in this unanimous consent request. And when we do not identify offsets, that means $10 billion has come out of readiness, out of the strength of our military to defend ourselves in the most dangerous time we've had since World War II." And with that logic, the chairman of Armed Services, the senator from Mississippi, objected to the senator from Connecticut's unanimous consent request. Now, what's changed is we now have a score on this specific bill. When the senator from Mississippi was objecting last time, he was quoting a $9 to $10 billion score. We just got the score on this one. Now it's $70 to $75 billion. Again, we all revere the finest among us. The men and women of this military that I know didn't serve and sacrifice oblivious to the fact that we're mortgaging our children's future. They served and sacrificed to secure our children's future. So we can't just come down here and talk about how much we love vets and how we want to support them. We also have to look at the reality of the situation, the dollars and cents. We're $39 trillion in debt. Well, the next decade, we'll probably go to $60 trillion. We have to look at the dollars and cents. So again, this unanimous consent request went from an assumed cost of $10 billion to now $70 billion, which reminds me an awful lot of the PAC Act, which I voted for and supported. By the way, when that was first being discussed, it was called the burn pit legislation. My former chief of staff served in Iraq. He was impacted by it. But I remember discussions, these are informal, I don't have anything formally written, but back in early discussion, the burn pit legislation, we were being told it was going to be $1 or $2 billion a year. When the House passed their version of the PAC Act, the CBO score is for $322 billion over 10 years. The Senate got its hands on that piece of legislation, and the score was $667 billion. The current 10-year window is over $700 billion. That's not chump change. That's approaching $1 trillion over 10 years. Now, again, it's not like we're spending less on veterans, even though our veteran population is declining. In 2019, we spent $200 billion on veterans benefits. Again, now, there are retirement stats in the Defense Department. I mean, this is just benefits for VA. $200 billion. That equates to about $11,500 per veteran. This is before the pandemic. So $200 billion, $11,500 per vet. This year, we'll spend about $435 billion. It's more than doubled. And our cost per vet is up to $28,000 per veteran. Somebody's got to look at this. we are $177 billion for veterans benefits above and beyond what we spent in 2019, fully inflated for inflation. There's no other account in the federal government that is that out of whack comparing 2019 fully inflated. So this is not the way to pass this legislation. The senator from Connecticut says all these co-sponsors, fine. Go through the committee process. Scrutinize this. Take a look at the score. Take a look at what the history of this is. It's not like we're the first Congress that reveres the members of the military. For some reason, they differentiate between somebody with 20 years service or less than. Let's look at that. Let's debate it. Let's bring it through the committee process, regular order. And then if it has that great support, I might even vote for it. But let's go through the process to see whether these policies make sense, whether it truly is double dipping, whether there's a better way of handling this. By the way, I've been told the Department of War is looking at this exact issue. They have reverence for the finest among us as well. But this is not the way to do this, not by unanimous consent request. It was objected to in October, and I'm going to object to it right now. So, Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I'm saddened. I'm angered, and I'm heartbroken for veterans across this great country that the Senate is failing to match their courage and dedication and failing to keep faith with them. I am heartbroken for a nation that can afford to spend tens of billions of dollars, as we are doing right now, perhaps hundreds of billions, in a conflict far away, putting American lives in harm's way, causing deaths, 6 at least so far, and casualties in real time, when we are failing to match their bravery with our own. It is unconscionable. A lot of words, a lot of numbers, a lot of fall back to Senate procedure, process, meaningless. The words and numbers are meaningless to veterans who are deprived of benefits they have earned, benefits they've been promised. So I regret my colleague's objection to this bill. I believe he's in a small minority of this body. He has a right to object under our rules. But I would like to offer to him a common sense middle ground. Even if we don't have unanimous consent to pass the Major Richard Spar right now and support our combat injured veterans, let's agree to a vote. Give us a vote. That's our job, to vote. I have a time agreement here that would authorize the Senate to take a single up and down vote on passage of this bill before August, not precipitously, sometime before August. One vote scheduled by the majority leader, Senator Thune, at his discretion. It could start and finish in 45 minutes. It simply guarantees one vote on passage at a 60-vote filibuster-proof threshold. That's our rules. And I would offer most respectfully that surely this great body can afford a half an hour or 45 minutes to give our combat-injured veterans a vote on restoration of their hard-earned benefits. Let us vote. That's our job. Let us give our veterans an up or down vote on a matter of simple justice, benefits they've been promised. So notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that at a time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Democratic leader, but no later than August 7th, 2026, the Committee on Armed Services be discharged and the Senate proceed to immediate consideration of S. 1032. Further, that there be up to 2 hours for debate on the bill equally divided between the two leaders or their designees, and that upon the use or yielding back of that time, the bill be considered read a third time, and the Senate vote on passage of the bill with 60 affirmative votes required for passage, all without further intervening action or debate, and no amendments or motions in order to the bill prior to the vote on passage.
Is there an objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
The senator from Wisconsin.
Mr. President, the senator from Connecticut said we need to do our job. I agree. You know, our job is to recognize the fact we're $39 trillion in debt on the path to $60 trillion with the Social Security Trust Fund running out during that time frame. Our job would be then to go through the regular order process of taking this before the committee. If it has such broad bipartisan support, fine. But again, similar efforts along these lines have failed in the past with Democrat majorities in both the House and the Senate. There's something about this that concerns people. So vet it out in the committee process. We're trying to bypass that process by unanimous consent request. This is not the way to produce good legislation, not when we're $39 trillion in debt. So for all the other reasons I mentioned in my previous objection, Mr. President, I object.
Objection noted.
We have regular order in the Senate, and there's regular order in the military. I will have a hard time looking in the eye those soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard members who are in conflict, in harm's way, right now in the Middle East, defending the national security of this great nation. I will have a hard time explaining to them what regular order means when they are combat injured and they suffer dollar for dollar their retirement pay because they are receiving disability benefits when they are injured right now in this conflict. I don't know how I can look them in the eye. I don't know how any member of the United States Senate can look them in the eye and explain, we won't vote because of regular order. That is a mockery of democracy. It is shameful. Thank you, Mr. President.